On this edition of The Color Between the Lines,
David Walker was trying to get the people who were enslaved to be free in their mind.
we speak to Dr. David Walker, an author and speaker who's also uniquely connected to David Walker, the abolitionist born in 1796. You don't want to miss this one. I'm Esther Dillard on the Black Information Network, chatting with writers and authors who offer an added perspective for our listeners. This is The Color Between the Lines.
1, 2, 3, 4.
History tells us that David Walker was born in 1796 in Wilmington, North Carolina, to an enslaved father and a free mother, which at that time meant that he was made automatically free. He grew up witnessing the horrors of slavery and became an outspoken abolitionist. He also helped start the first Black newspaper in the United States called the Freedom's Journal. On this edition of The Color Between the Lines, we speak with Dr. David Walker, who has a unique connection to the abolitionist. The author, motivational speaker, and coach talked to me about how he first learned about the abolitionist when he was in elementary school.
Yeah, I was a student in middle school, and as I remember, it was the first day of class, and the teacher was calling the attendance. And of course, she was going through every child's name, and by my last name being Walker, I'm always at the end of the line, right? And just as she was getting ready to get to my name, I'm looking up because I know she's going to call my name. And at the same time, she looked up and began to pan the room to see which child was going to answer to the next name. And she says, David Walker. And I raised my hand and said, present. And then she asked me, she said, have you ever heard of the historical David Walker? And I said, no, I didn't. And she said, yeah, David Walker wrote David Walker's Appeal during slavery. He was a slave abolitionist. So she gave us a quick summary. I don't know whether the rest of the class was excited, but I was paying attention because his name was David Walker. And of course, as you can imagine, we didn't have Google back then. So I had to go home and get an encyclopedia and read about him. And, of course, middle school and high school didn't really pay a whole lot about him, but having heard who he was. But then when I got older and became more involved with social justice cause and the empowerment of Black people, I remembered and I went looking at David Walker again. And now he is my hero, not only just my Black history hero, but he's my hero all year long, David Walker.
Well, how has he influenced your personal and your professional life?
Yeah, David, that appeal that he wrote back in 1829 was appealed about telling Black people, even though they were enslaved because it was during slavery, that they were to rise up and to know that God had created them to be just as equal as their slave masters. So they were to fight against oppression. And yes, in my work today, I see that. I see the cause of actually wanting to fight against oppressive systems that bind us, inflict us, and cause us pain. And if you don't stand up against the system is going to dominate you. And it is still present today. So I take the words of David Walker, the mission of David Walker, and I really make it a part of my life today.
How did I understand you are an author yourself? You're the author of a book called The Champion's Mind. Does this in any way connect to that book at all?
Well, the book doesn't specifically connect to David Walker's vision. It doesn't connect specifically, but here's what The Champion's Mind talks about. It talks about how to be a champion. And maybe that's the connection between my book and what David Walker's appeal was. When you begin to stand up and live out your life, live out your dreams, live out your purpose and your destiny, I could see that being that appeal to like David Walker had, because it was about standing up and knowing your God-given rights in society. So The Champion's Mind is about winning in life, winning in every aspect, whether it's your business, whether it's your home, your marriage. God sent us here to be champions. And I wrote that book, The Champion's Mind, How to Defeat Giants and Win, because life is all about giants coming into our lives. There are obstacles, there are setbacks, and we're just going to have to overcome them in order for us to win.
Talk about what motivated you to start this book, because you have a unique story in how this all started.
Yeah, my story goes back to actually when I was born. It was March of 1960. And back then there were no sonograms, no gender reveal parties. My mom was pregnant, but she didn't know my gender. And her and my dad, they decided that if I was a boy, they were going to name me Michael. My mother was so excited, went around telling all of her girlfriends, my son's going to be named Michael. My son's going to be named Michael. I think my mom thought I was going to be an angel. No, mom, wasn't going to be no angel, right? But she comes to my grandma, Martha, and she says, Ma, if I have a second son, I got an older brother, Robert, we've decided to name him Michael. But my grandma, Martha, turned to my mother after hearing that news. She looked her directly in her eye and she said, his name is David. Because in the Bible, David was a king, David killed Goliath, and David was a great man. And my grandson will be named David, and he will be a great man. Esther, I love my grandmother because she saw the giant slayer in me. She saw me as a winner, an overcomer, and a champion. And so I lived my life in the mindset of the biblical character David. And one day I was going through the scriptures, reading about him, and I found out that he was more than just a giant slayer, but he won at everything that he did. And I came across a scripture, if I may say, 1 Samuel 16:18, that's the scripture, where they were describing 6 things about his character, his characteristics, I should say. They said, number one, they were looking for someone to play the harp because King Saul had an evil spirit on him. And they was looking for someone to play the harp. And they said, I know someone, his name is David. They said 6 things. They said, he's an excellent musician. He's brave. He's a warrior. He's well-spoken. He's good looking, and God is with him. And when I saw those 6 things, I said, that's it. Those were the characteristics, or I should say, the armor that he had in order to win and defeat. So I wrote that book, The Champion's Mind, 6 chapters. Number 1, master your gift. Number 2, be fearless. Number 3, be a relentless leader. Number 4, communication. Number 5, be a person of character. Number 6, have a God relationship. I believe in the God relationship in order to succeed. And then in chapter number 7, I love number 7 because all the first chapters deal with how to be successful, how to be a champion. But chapter 7 is called the dark side, because we all have something in us that if we don't watch it, it'll destroy everything that we've built.
I love what part of your book also not only deals with these principles, but it deals with something where the stories of you growing up and how
Yes.
you had to overcome certain things, and you didn't originally, you were supposed to be in sports. You were supposed to be a sports person, and it all changed with one really defining moment. And I'd love you to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I grew up in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. If I'm sure your audience is well versed with Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. Is the home of Biggie and Jay-Z and Shirley Chisholm and so many different people. So when you grow up in Bed-Stuy, we all wanted to be what I call a living legend. No doubt Biggie, living legend, Jay-Z, living legend. But baseball was my thing. It was the thing that I was going to do, grow up. I grew up desiring to be a professional athlete, professional baseball player. And in my senior year of college, I received a letter from the Los Angeles Dodgers inviting me to come and try out. Esther, getting that letter, oh man, my dreams were about to come true. I was excited. I was thrilled because I was getting ready to become a living legend out of Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. But a few days before the tryout, I remember playing in the game, and I was standing on second base, and my teammate got a big base hit to the outfield. And as I'm dashing around third, trying to come home and score a run for my team, there was a play at home plate. The throw was high. The catcher, he jumps up in the air to catch the ball. And as I go to put my foot on home base, the weight of the catcher comes down and it breaks my leg. Esther, as you can imagine, that day I was just rolling and screaming, my leg, my leg. And I got a chance to look down at my leg, and I knew what had happened. I knew that I wasn't going to make that tryout. And I knew that my baseball career was over. But there's something, and as you can imagine, I was sad and depressed and disappointed because not only was my leg broken, but my dreams were shattered right there on that baseball field. But I realized that while I was laying there, I was experiencing what you call a defining moment. It's been said that when a defining moment comes, either you define the moment or the moment will define you. And so what I decided to do that day, get up, I went, I rehabbed my leg, I came back to school, I finished my degree, I earned several degrees. I became a teacher, a school administrator. I even was a pastor for a number of years. And then I refereed NCAA Division I basketball for over 25 years, you know? And so, Esther, when I look back at that moment, that setback, breaking of my leg and feeling like my dream was shattered, I decided to get up. And now, when I look at what I overcame then and what I have now become, here's what I say: I win. I say I'm a champion. And that's how you determine what a champion is. It's a person who gets up after a setback, after a challenging moment. And sometimes that setback, as I said in a recent talk, it could be a broken leg, it could be a broken marriage, it could be a broken dream, it could be a broken spirit. But get up, get back in the race, because as our a good friend, I'm forgetting his name right now, Jolly, Willie Jolly, he would say a setback is a setup for a comeback. And so, yeah, I came back. And so that was a difficult moment in my life, but I persisted, and that's what champions do.
Well, I'm going to close with a question in regard to how this all connects to David Walker, the abolitionist, and how does it, I guess, his legacy influences you and how you talk to people today.
Yeah. You know, again, David told Black people who were enslaved. It's not like today. Today, people can walk around and they're free, even though there is a system of oppression. But back then, they were actually enslaved in 1829. But David Walker told them to stand up against their oppressors. And how do I relate that to today? We have many things in our world today that's oppressing to us and oppressive. The system that we live in is oppressive. But here's how we're free. David Walker was trying to get the people who were enslaved to be free in their minds. Because although they were in chains, if they became free in their minds, they were free people, because a free mind will help you get out of bondage, will help you get out of chains. So today, you can be out of chains, but you can still be enslaved in your mind. So we got to empower our minds. We've got to, educate our minds. We got to know that God has put in us all that we need to win, to be champions. And I think David Walker's message applies to today in 2025, because, they got a project going on in 2025. So David Walker's appeal applies today, just like it did in 1829. Stand up against those who are trying to oppress you.
Thank you, David Walker, for joining us on the BIN.
Thank you for having me.
That's it for this edition of The Color Between the Lines. I'm Esther Dillard on the Black Information Network.